You don't know what God is making while you're aching. You don't know what God is making while you're aching. You don't know what God is making while you're crying. You don't know what God is making while you're lonely. You don't know what God is making while you're suffering. But I declare unto you, he is making something. You may feel dislocated. You may feel dislodged. You can't always see what the master is doing. Only when we look back, then we see that God had a plan. You must believe that in spite of the suffering, you will still get there. That God has a watch and it never loses time. And he knows exactly when to raise you and exactly when to bring you out. And when the stage is set and the time is right, nobody can hold you down when God gets ready to raise you up. So it doesn't understand the suffering, and it doesn't understand the pain, and it can't hear me. And sometimes the hardest part about being a preacher is that you want so much for the people to get it, and sometimes the people who need it the most, they really don't really hear you. That you're on course when you're off course. That you're planted when you thought you were buried. That the only way up is to go down. That everything in the kingdom is backwards. That if you exalt yourself, he'll abase you. If you abase yourself, he'll exalt you. Death is necessary to create life. Jesus says, I come that you might have life, and then dies. Because the cost of life was death. Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? That right now, those of you that are watching and those of you that are listening at me may be going through something that seems unbearable and painful and personal and difficult to articulate to anybody else, because pain is always personal. Sometimes it is necessary in order to cultivate in the vineyard. You have to disrupt the soil. You have to turn it over. You have to disrupt everything around it. You have to pull some weeds sometimes. You got to uproot some plants. You have to cause this evil in order to get where you want to go. And it's messy and it's dirty and it's not right, but it's necessary. And we feel pain. And sometimes it's pain we don't even have anybody to talk to about. God works in crushing. And it pleased him to bruise it. It pleased God to bruise us. Not because he is sadistic, not because we are masochotic. It pleases him to bruise us because he knows that the end result will put us in a state where we can no longer ferment, where we can handle a setback, a disappointment, where we can handle a hurt. See, wine doesn't spoil. It'll last for years and years and years in the dark, in the basement, in the cellar, because it's been through enough crushing to endure time. And you can tell when a person has been crushed because they are survivors. Sometimes you have to realize that you have to settle to walk in the dark, to walk by faith and not by sight, to not ask God to appeal to your intellect. Because when you ask God to appeal to your intellect, you ask him to come down to your level. When his thoughts are above your thoughts and his ways are above your ways, he has to come down to your level to explain himself. And sometimes God is not interested in your intellect. He is interested in your obedience. Do you hear what I'm saying to you? Because obedience is proven best when you don't understand. If I tell my child, clean up the room, you don't get to ask me why. I don't have to explain to you, we got company coming over and we got this. No. I said, clean the room. Obedience is better than sacrifice. Obedience is better than understanding. And God is trying to teach us to obey him and to trust in the fact, get this, that pruning is not punishment. That you are not cursed because you had a bad day. That God is not punishing you just because you're going through suffering. They feel the same, but they're not the same. The intention is quite different between pruning and punishment. Pruning is the reward of having something of value.